Welcome to this episode of Athletic Training Chat. We are on with Meg Johnson today. Not too long of an intro, but Meg is doing a very interesting route into becoming an athletic trainer and already becoming an athletic trainer, and just her history of how she's still playing collegiate softball, plus being certified, and then also now pursuing her master's degree. It's a very unique story, and we were glad to hear it. A lot of insight, a lot of foresight by Meg in terms of trying to figure out how to have the greatest impact she can as she's gearing up to be ready for her career. And based on everything she talked about, it's going to be a great career. So we hope you really enjoy that. If you haven't yet, please check out our Throw a Lifeline kind of give back program. We're working to raise about $200 per kit. That will pay for all the supplies on the inside, and then Mueller is going to gift the actual emergency first in kit. When we hit our $200, they will match that with the kit. So we're a little over halfway there for our first one. You can support by listening, sharing, so more people listen, or if you are able to, we have a Venmo, PayPal that you can shoot over a donation. That's all housed on our parent podcast site, clinicallypress.com/throw a lifeline. Again, Mueller helping us out with this, doing everything they can to help support the profession with athletic trainers. So always check them out, and we appreciate them powering this podcast. Without further ado, enjoy this episode. Well, welcome to this episode of Athletic Training Chat. We are on with Meg Johnson, who we got connected up through, along with Mr. Jeremy Jackson of Sports Medicine Broadcast on Twitter, because who can't you meet on Twitter, which is a good thing. But one of our former guests, Crystal, highlighted this because you had a unique post about being a student athlete and also being credentialed, and I believe getting granted a 6th year of eligibility, which, having worked in collegiate athletics, is no small feat. A little more interesting this year with COVID and the rules seemingly going out the window for a lot of different things. But yeah, we're going to do this episode really focusing on kind of what brought Meg to this point. And then I believe shortly after we release this one, we'll coordinate it with Jeremy to talk about how you want to implement all of your experience into the future. So we'll try not to take too much information from his podcast coming up. But without continuing to go on, I want to turn it over to you to just give a little bit more of your background, what inspired that tweet about the funny looks you get potentially, or the different comments, and we'll jump into it from there.
All right. Well, so I'm very freshly graduated last year. I got my bachelor's in athletic training, and I haven't even been certified for a year yet. But I was a 4-year varsity softball player at my alma mater, and I decided to go back for my master's. And I decided to take a little bit of a different route. Instead of going back for something like exercise science, I went back for clinical counseling and psychology. And
Nice.
I've always loved psychology. So I'll probably talk about that a little bit in the
Absolutely.
podcast. But, so I was like, this really fits with what I want to do. But with COVID, we had eligibility, and then I had a medical hardship semester. So it just worked out that I actually had 3.5 years of eligibility left. But I was like, that seems a little bit excessive. I'll just, I'll use all 6 years. And then that last half a semester, I'll just use that for internship in school and all that kind of stuff. But it's kind of crazy, I do get some funny responses on Twitter and stuff like that. So that's kind of what inspired that tweet. And that tweet blew up. I wasn't expecting it to get the response that it did. And, it was definitely some mixed reviews, because there's a lot of people that were like, shouldn't you be focusing on your career? And then there was a lot of people that were like, you have your whole life to focus on your career. And
Sure.
So I have spent a lot of time, thinking about that kind of thing. But ultimately, I decided, I only have so much time to keep playing my sport. So I might as well stick it out and see what I can do with it. So, yeah.
So I'm curious, and it's up to you if you want to release, say the name of your alma mater. It sounds,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
but go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I went to go to Eastern University in the greater Philadelphia area. So
Okay.
right down the street from Villanova, right outside of Philly. So yeah, it's a little tiny school, but
What division?
it's a Division III.
Okay.
Yeah.
Having worked in Division III, I've always find that I find out more schools belong in Division III than I've ever heard of. It's
Yep.
impossible to keep up with them. There
Yeah.
just seems to be so many.
Right.
So going into college and deciding to go there, did you know you wanted to be an athletic trainer?
I originally wanted to be a physical therapist.
Okay.
So my background in high school, I kind of came from like one of those small town, like Friday Night Lights, like softball played off campus. So we only got coverage from not our school's athletic trainer. So didn't have that type of relationship with our athletic trainer to really understand like what an athletic trainer did. And I thought I wanted to be a physical therapist, but we only had athletic training at Eastern. So I went that route and I took all the prerequisites for physical therapy and stuff like that. And then I realized very, very quickly going into clinical that I loved athletic training and I loved that setting. And that was just more the setting for me. And, I don't know, it was just different. And I spent all this time thinking I wanted to be a physical therapist and taking all those prerequisites, and then very quickly realized that athletic training was definitely more on par with what I saw myself doing.
So how did those conversations go, or even get started, with the program director, I'm assuming, of, hey, I want to be an athletic trainer, but I'm also wanting to play softball, which I know just from places I've been, that is not, it was never an option, as an undergrad. Obviously now with a lot of the transition to masters, entry level masters, that'll open up a lot of avenues for, student athletes to look at still being a, athletic trainer as a profession. But
Right.
You're one of the few I encountered that were able to somehow do both.
Yeah. So it actually isn't very uncommon. At Eastern, a lot of people who have gone through our program have played sports and done athletic training.
Oh.
But our program director was very candid about the fact that athletic training needed to be a priority. So whenever you weren't in season, athletic training was the priority. And then so how I did things was I didn't have a winter break. I would do my clinical rotation over winter break so that in the spring I could focus on softball, but in the fall and the winter I was doing my clinical rotations. So it was a little bit harder for our fall sport athletes to do that, but for our spring sport athletes, we were pretty much able to do that with a little bit of ease because we had a non-traditional season that was a little bit easier, like to work with in the fall. But there's a lot of my classmates, I want to say almost all of us were athletes. And at some point or another, I think by the time we ended, only 3 or 4 of us were still athletes. But a lot of people just realized that, their sport wasn't a priority. And some people realized that they could compartmentalize it and prioritize it and still make it work. So that was kind of how I viewed it, was that these are 2 things that I really care about. So I'm going to put, max amount of effort that I possibly can into it. And that got very stressful at times, but it was something that I really wanted to do. So I figured out a way to make it work.
Yeah, I feel like that, a lot of athletic training students will talk about how time management is something that they really learned just by being an athletic training student. I can only imagine the next level that took for being an athlete on top of that.
Right. Yeah, it was a lot of showing up at the cages when I was getting done rotation, or there was one point where my senior year, we were doing like team assignments where like you would work with a specific team, and we were like coming up on preseason, and it was myself and another softball player, and her and I would we were at the same site, and we would drive from our site. We'd be coming into the gym, eating dinner. Like girls would be like, "Oh my God, you guys are so like chaotic. Like you guys need to calm down." And we were like, "We're just coming back from like spending like 6 hours at rotation. Like, wrestling was crazy today. And now we have to be here for another 4 hours until 10 o'clock. And it was just lots of long days and just trying to figure out like where to squeeze things in. And, when it came to homework and all that kind of stuff, just chipping away at stuff like day by day, and then trying to make time for softball and, finding time on your own when you couldn't make it because you were at rotation, and trying to be there for your team, but also show up at rotation. It was just the ultimate balancing act, honestly.
Absolutely. Did you come across any other hurdles that really, had to be a focus to do both? Because, you just mentioned that, basically when your afternoon started, your afternoon was spoken for, and obviously trying to perform at a high level as an athlete and also be a student. You start losing time for, sleep and all the things we know to
Right.
be important. But any other major hurdles that, maybe aren't, people wouldn't see from just looking at it from the outside?
Right. So I wouldn't say that like my biggest hurdle is like the typical experience, but I did mention that I had like a medical hardship year.
Mhm.
And that was my biggest hurdle like in life thus far. So in 2018, which was my junior year fall, I was diagnosed with Chiari malformation, and I was having like severe headaches. I was losing feeling in my left arm. So like as an athletic training student, I was like, oh my God, how am I going to rip tape? Like, how am I going to do like
Sure.
special tests? Like if I can't feel my arm. And then as an athlete, I was like, oh crap, how am I going to play? Like if I can't feel my arm, like this is horrible. And I had like 2 active syrinxes in my spinal cord that were growing. And basically within a couple of weeks, I was having emergency surgery. And at the time, I was doing a Division I football rotation, and I was on that 4 a.m. wake up schedule, traveling every weekend. And it was just, that in our program was also the hardest semester academically. So it was like this constant battle of like, I was in our fall season, I had medical hardship weighing over me. I was trying to pick up academics. I was in arguably my hardest rotation, like as far as our schedule was concerned. And that was just like the hardest like life obstacle that I've had to face,
Yeah.
like as far as all that was concerned. But it definitely taught me a lot. Like it was really hard. And, but that just confirmed like for me, like my love of the psychology of things. And I think that's kind of how like being a student athlete, like being an athletic trainer, and then like going through that life experience, like, and those obstacles just kind of confirmed like what I saw my path being, and just kind of solidified like my love for the psychology of things. I was like, well, if this is something that I'm going through, like all of these other people must be going through stuff like this too. Like maybe it's
Sure.
not, doesn't look like what I'm going through, but like, everybody has something. And, that's just something that I fell in love with. Like out of like the darkness, I found something that I really was passionate about and something I really loved. So, like I had these obstacles that like made it feel like it was impossible some days. And, maybe I wasn't as present at rotation as I needed to be because I wasn't playing softball and I wanted to watch my team. So I was like sneaking in, watching the live streams and stuff like that. But, it made all the difference, like having people around me too, that were like very supportive, and like my preceptors being understanding, and like just understanding the obstacles and the hurdles. Like, they didn't see it as like me being a bad student or like me being a bad athletic training student, or like not being like my priority. Oh my gosh, my priority is not being like on athletic training or anything like that. They just understood what I was going through, and like their empathy and their support towards me kind of showed me like that's the type of athletic trainer that I want to be. Like I want to show like that type of empathy and support, like for patients that I deal with and athletes that I deal with. And, that kind of shaped like the direction that I would end up going in. So, it was an obstacle that ended up, shaping ultimately what I want to do with the rest of my life, I guess.
No, that's a great story, and that actually inspires another question. Uh, Without getting too far into necessarily what you're going to want to do in the future, because again,
Right.
they're
Right.
thinking about you.
Yeah.
But from your perspective, mental health has become, as it rightfully so, a very big focal point just across the board, and it was becoming that pre-COVID, and obviously COVID has now highlighted it even more for so many reasons. Working with Division III athletes specifically, which had done for the last 7 years, that was a thing we were beginning to focus on. We made a great hire, and someone that was very similar to you in terms of their interest and dedication to it, which is going to be great for their future and the people that they serve. But what unique aspect do you think being a student athlete and truly understanding the grinds, especially at Division III. You know, I have this discussion with many people in that world of like, yes, it's supposed to be the ultimate student athlete experience. And I think it is to a lot of degrees, but there's always that desire for people to want to get better and coaches to want to do the next thing. And ultimately, sometimes I think that Division III model gets lost, and that the mental health aspect of it can be such a big part because of the pressures, real or perceived. So very long-winded thing to get to a question is, you know, what do you think your experience as a student athlete going through what you did, also seeing it from the athletic training side, not just with yourself or your team, but other student athletes, will help you kind of moving forward and really being able to make that impact?
Right. Well, I definitely think like going through the trenches myself, I guess, helped prepare me with good coping mechanisms, and, you know, helped me see that stuff firsthand. So like now I know how to better, like I said, cope with things, and I know how to better handle stresses. And, you know, I realized like, you know, maybe when I need to go start therapy or like go seek help and stuff like that. So like going through that stuff myself, I think gives me like an advantage. Like being a student athlete is a very unique thing. So going through that as a student athlete and then working with student athletes, I think one gives me some credibility in their eyes to say like, you know, hey, I did this too. And like, I know exactly what you're experiencing. And like, here's what I've been through. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've had that conversation with like high school athletes. Like at one point I was like working in an all boys school, and they were like, what could you possibly know about what I'm going through? And I was like,
Sure.
you know, this is what I went through. I'm going to be very transparent with you. This is what I went through. You know, like I had to look at myself in the mirror and say, Megan, go to therapy, you know, like go seek help from somebody, like, you know, and just that level of connection with somebody, and like having been through it myself, I think I guess like getting at what you're getting at, like I think that's going through that gives me that perspective that like now that I'm in a position where like, you know, I'm an athletic trainer and I can help patients and help athletes, like, you know, it gives me some type of credibility, and it gives me like some type of background knowledge of like, yeah, I've been through this too. I know what you're talking about. Like I've been through it. Here's what helped me. Like at least giving some people some direction or like some type of advice to at least give them a starting point on like, here's where you can go from here, and like maybe find something that helps you, or like maybe find something, I don't know, to help cope with it. Cause, you know, like you said, with like the D3 model getting lost sometimes, you know, like my coaches are former Division I coaches. It's a very intense environment sometimes,
Sure.
and they're phenomenal coaches. And I love my team and I love our program, but you know, it doesn't matter what division you play at college. You know, like you're a college athlete, and that's how people see it. And so things just get really intense and things get really hard. And you know, sometimes I think, especially at Division III, everyone's like, "Oh, it's just Division III. You know, it shouldn't be that hard," but it can be. That grind is
Yeah.
brutal, and you know, so I don't know. I think having been through it myself, like I said, I think it gives me some type of, I don't know, ability to relate to other people, and ability to relate to what they're going through, and just be able to help them start off on the right foot. So,
Yeah, I think that from multiple perspectives, you know, you being a student athlete and then also just going through some of the things you did, like just to be able to say that, you know, you understand, which you actually do understand a lot of what people might be going through those, because you've gone through those situations. I wasn't a collegiate athlete. I decided to just go to school instead. I maybe could have played D3 and something, but I can't relate to that level just because I never did it. And not to say that that doesn't allow me to still do a good job, but it's just a different level that I think is awesome that you'll be able to utilize to impact in the future.
Mhm.
Any other things from being a student athlete while working towards your athletic training degree that have complemented each other that might be unique?
Man. um, Geez.
Did it help
If
connect like
anything,
what you were learning better? I know that was always a big thing for me. I
yeah.
liked working out and pretended I knew what strength and conditioning was. Really didn't have a clue in hindsight, but that always
Right.
made it click. It seemingly more because I could draw on both of those things.
Right. I would definitely agree with that. Like it helped me learn better. But I would say one facet that this just like hit my mind was the relationships that I was able to build with like other members of like, I don't know, the sports medicine staff or like stuff like that, like our strength and conditioning coaches and like the coaches, like kind of that aspect of things, and like watching how those relationships play out and like building those relationships. And like, especially now that I'm a grad student and I'm certified and I have these relationships with like our athletic trainers and our strength and conditioning coaches and our coaches and like all of these members of the sports medicine staff, like I think being a student athlete and having built those relationships as a student athlete, I think that's something that does complement like my certification really well and being an athletic trainer really well, is that, you know, you always hear stories of like maybe those facets of the sports medicine team not getting along or not seeing eye to eye on stuff.
Sure.
And being a student athlete and kind of having to live in this world where all of those members have to get along with you in some capacity, or like you have to make those relationships work in some capacity with every single facet of it. I think that really helps me kind of see eye to eye with all of those different people and like maybe learn how to better build and forge those relationships with those people, or kind of see like, you know, maybe where strength and conditioning is coming from and like build that relationship with them, and like, you know, maybe where the coaches are coming from and stuff like that, and just kind of speak their language a little bit better, you know, like
Sure.
not always coming from like I speak athletic trainer very well, but like speaking strength and conditioning very well, or like speaking coach very well. And I think being a student athlete like has really helped me build that skill. Like it helps me interpret those things a little bit better. And that was definitely very helpful, like at some of my rotation sites too, of like places where maybe those relationships weren't so great, and like having relationships built then with like their strength and conditioning coaches or like school nurses, even like stuff like that. Just, I think being a student athlete, that has been one of the most valuable things to come out of it. So yeah.
No, that's a really good point. Yeah, those fractured or strained relationships can present a lot more problems than they're going to solve when things get a little territorial. So yeah, being able to utilize that experience to bridge the gap. And you know what, I hear this a lot from people I work with. You know, it's all about the student athlete experience, and so anytime you can relate it back to that, and you knowing and experiencing what that's like, what a powerful thing to be able to utilize.
Right. Yeah. You kind of have to just learn to like speak their language a little bit and see where other people are coming from and put yourself in their shoes. And, you know, that can be a hard thing when, you know, especially when you're working and you're the one in like, I want to say like an authority position almost, like as an athletic trainer, it can be kind of hard to like see the other side of things, or like, you know, maybe see where like coaches or strength and conditioning or whatever, like whoever is coming from. But you know, like I said, being in the position of like being a student athlete and like hearing things from all sides of those people all of the time, you just kind of learn to like pick up on like how different people or like different groups like speak about things, or like I don't know where they're coming from on things. And it really has been very valuable, because that's not something you can teach in school. You can't teach kids how to like understand like, you know, where a strength and conditioning coach is coming from. Like, you know, you only teach them like how to treat patients and you know, that kind of thing. That's the goal in athletic training school. So, you know, it's kind of the subtleties that you like pick up on like as you're working. But I think it's a benefit that I had it, you know, being a student athlete. So I got it in undergrad, and now in grad school I'm getting it before I even really start off my career. So
sure. Yeah, those interpersonal skills are hard to develop. They just take time and exposure, and that can not always easy.
Right.
How do you think, you being a student athlete and working with, you know, athletic trainers, you know, throughout your career, maybe the same one, maybe a couple different ones depending on turnover, in your experiences there will influence how you interact and, you know, work with your patients in the future, whether they be student athletes or wherever you potentially end up. And, you know, student athletes can be kind of a pain at times, and you know, have their own opinions about things. And you know, the internet is as dangerous as it is helpful when it comes to stuff. But what is that unique perspective done for you?
Well, you know, so on our team, I'm also a captain. So this is a skill that I have been learning. One that I've also learned at clinical on, you know, how to deal with student athletes and how to deal with patients and parents and
Yep.
all that kind of stuff, you know. But I think being a captain is definitely helped a lot with this, because you're trying to manage 18 different girls with 18 different opinions, and
Sure.
then be the liaison between the coaches and whoever else, and then the girls, and just trying to manage those things and hold people accountable and just get the job done and get everybody on the same page. So I think something like that translates over really well to athletic training, because, you know, when you have patients and student athletes who maybe aren't the most compliant, or a parent that comes in and they went to so-and-so who said this, and, you know, so-and-so's a nurse and they think they know, you know, whatever, and they came down on the field because they think they know more than you, like that type of situation. Like, I think just learning how to, I don't know, like learning how to diffuse those situations and pick your battles and just put the well-being of the patient or the student athlete first, even if they can be difficult. But you also have to, learning to establish boundaries is something that I had not been good at in my like early student days, and something that I'm getting a lot better at. So, you know, like I said, learning to pick your battles, and then also learning when to establish good boundaries. So I think in my senior year, I'd definitely come into like a comfort in this. Like, I was working at an all boys high school. They could get a little rowdy. And there was times where I was like, nope, you're not going to talk like that in front of me. I don't want to hear about what you're doing after school. Like, this is a professional environment. Like, we can have fun, but this is going to be professional, and you guys are going to respect me. And this is like one of my favorite stories about clinical, but I ended up making a jar called the S jar, and it was like shenanigans, like swear words, shirtlessness, like all this stuff. And they had to put something in the S jar if they were breaking the rules. And, you know, just establishing boundaries like that. And it was something that, like, it sounded so silly when we did it, but they ended up loving it. And then they were actually abiding by like the boundaries that we set. So like, just like learning how to like pick your battles, establish good boundaries, and then, you know, I don't know, just it's hard to please everybody. So then just being comfortable not being like a people pleaser and putting the patient or the student athlete's well-being first is ultimately, like, I don't know, that's kind of what I've like translated over from like being a captain and being a leader at softball, and trying to juggle all those different opinions and all those different people and their different needs over to like athletic training. So I hope that answered your question.
No, I think it did. I think it was a great example of, you know, you've got your kind of general principles, yet you're going to work to meet the person or the patient or whoever it is where they are, and find where that happy, you know, middle ground is, where you're not so strict that this is how it's going to have to be, because you might lose a lot of people in that way, but also not just letting it be a free for all where there's no control and everything goes out the window. And you're not getting anything accomplished. So I really liked how you were saying, you know, it will be fun, but it's still going to be professional. And I think that's very feasible. Anything we missed when it comes to being a student athlete and an athletic trainer, without delving too far into the future?
I don't think we really missed anything. I think we kind of hit on a lot.
So just to kind of wrap up, so just where you're currently at. So you got this spring is the last year of softball?
I will have next year as well. So next year will be my 6th year.
Gotcha. So then this first year of grad school.
Yes, this is my first year.
All right. So you'll be finishing up grad school and softball all at the same time. Well, that works out well.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
And then off to the real world, right?
Yep. I'll just have a little bit more internship before I can get my license in professional counseling, and then it's a little bit different than how athletic training works with our certification and our licensing. So I'll finish school, and then I'll have like a couple hundred more hours of like internship experience, and then I can get it and just go. So yeah, it's a little bit different.
I'm going to steal this one that almost just set up Jeremy for it. But then with that, what job setting are you hoping to find? Is it a potential combination, maybe at a bigger school where you can potentially do some the licensed counseling, and also the clinical side of athletic training? I know that's ultimately something we were striving for with the person I referenced earlier that we hired once they finish up their master's degree in that. But curious as to what you're seeing for that, again, without taking too much.
I would love to do both. Athletic training is like my true love, but I have always thought psychology has been a great supplement to that. So,
Sure.
I don't think I could ever see myself like jumping full into, counseling and clinical counseling, like in my own practice. But if there was a way or a setting that would allow me to kind of do both, um, you know, I would absolutely love that. But no matter what pans out, I think even if I just stuck it out with traditional athletic training and just had, my license in professional counseling, like I think that's a great supplement. And I don't think there's anything, I don't think that would be a waste, like
No,
essentially is what I'm trying to get at. I
no,
think I would still be in a great position to like, refer athletes to someone, or I would have good connections like with internships like that I've been at that I could refer athletes or
sure.
patients or whatever and be able to pick up on things. Cause, part of the reason why I went this route instead of doing something that was more like exercise science and then
Yep.
with like a side in psychology was because a lot of times that kind of stuff just focuses on like depression and anxiety. And I was like, there's so much more to it than that. Like there's so much more beyond the surface of that. And, I've had experiences at my clinical rotations where we've had, student athletes with mental health disorders that were not anxiety and depression. And I had not ever seen that before. So I just kind of wanted a broader scope of, what does this look like and what can I do in order to best help my patients one day. So I would love to be able to do both and have the best of both worlds, but we'll see what happens. It's one step at a time,
Yeah,
but
I think you have a lot of value going into almost any interview process, depending on the setup of a school. Uh, for if nothing else, to be that liaison, to be the first point of contact to then exactly what you said, and that, like we had talked about, like the way the focus of it's going, rightfully so. That's going to be a huge asset for you and wherever you end up getting to work,
right.
when you
Yeah.
finish everything up. So
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited.
yeah, as you should be.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to jump into the AT chat questions then?
Yeah, for sure.
No, I feel like I moved these around or I'm missing one somehow. So I'm going to throw
I
one.
might have accidentally deleted one.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
That might have
maybe
been
that
my
was the
fault.
case.
That
So
might
the
have been my
first
fault.
one, is just, where do you see the profession of athletic training going in the next 5 to 10 years?
All right. Well, I definitely see it expanding into more non-traditional settings. And even in the traditional setting, like more club teams getting athletic trainers, that type of thing. It's not as common for that where I'm from. Like, I don't really see that, but I think that's kind of the direction that we're starting to go. But I would love to just see athletic training in the next 5 to 10 years be a little bit more inclusive and a little bit more diverse. Like, being a woman in this field, it's still a little bit tough, I would say.
Sure.
And, I think we're on the verge of having great conversations and great breakthroughs, but I'd definitely like to see some more like representation, like nationally and like at state levels and stuff like that. Like, here in Pennsylvania, Pats, I think, we have great women in leadership positions, and that's awesome to see. But I would love to see in the next 5, 10 years, like that be a more national representation. And, just generally across the board, we have so many women in this field. And I can't remember the exact like statistic, but I remember it being like over 50% of like athletic training students at the time of like when I heard the statistic were women. And I was
Yeah.
like, can we limit like our hires based on that? Like, are we going to
Sure.
limit like our hiring pool to, less than 50% of our potential candidates, and so I would hope in the next 5 to 10 years that things get a little bit more inclusive and a little bit more diverse. That's just what I would like to see. And I think we're on the verge of that. So
Agreed. So you are a young athletic trainer, but
Yes.
we'll just amend this one a little bit.
Okay.
What advice would you go back and give yourself, maybe before you decided to get into the program, or as you got into the program, if you could go back and tell yourself?
Um, some advice that I would give myself is that my path in life and my career path isn't going to look the same as everybody else's, and it's okay that it doesn't. I think something that I struggle with a lot, and I might have said this earlier, but even now, like, I'm a very active social media user, and how we got connected was through my tweets. And
Yep.
even now, like, I still struggle with the fact, like, when I was deciding to come back and play softball, and I turned down like a teaching assistantship at a very well-known research university, and people looked at me like I was crazy for that. And they were like, why are you not starting your career? Why, all of the people in my cohort were going out and getting jobs, and they're going to grad school and working. And I was like, yeah, softball, and
Yep.
that was something that I really struggled with for a long time. And something that I struggled with through school was like, if something in my path looked a little bit different than somebody else's, I was like, well, why does it look different? And so I think if I were to go back and tell myself, like, it's okay that your path looks different. Like, it's okay. You're going to learn valuable stuff along the way that is going to offer you unique perspective. And that's okay. Like, some random person on Twitter that's telling you, you should have given up softball, that doesn't matter. Like, the only thing
Sure.
that matters is like your opinion of yourself and what that you're getting out of it, so that's
Absolutely.
definitely something that I would go back.
No, that's fantastic. And I think what you're going to get out of it's probably going to be worth every bit of going the path that you're
Right.
going. From
Yeah. Yeah.
What has been the most influential resource that you have found so far in your career?
Funny enough, I think thus far, besides all of the valuable learning that I've done in school,
Yep.
I think that social media has been one of my biggest resources. It's a great strength of mine. And I think with younger generations coming up, like, we've always been told by our parents, older mentors, stuff like that, like, watch your social medias, like, be careful, like, don't post so much, don't be controversial, stuff like that. But I just realized that social media was kind of one of my strengths. Like, it's something that I'm very comfortable with, and it's something generationally that, like, my generation is very comfortable with that kind of stuff, but use it as a strength. Like, find your strengths and roll with it. And I've used it as a huge networking platform. I've gotten in touch with so many athletic trainers across the country and had so many great talks and so many like great interactions with people that I would have never had if I just stuck in my little bubble here in Pennsylvania. And the only people that I was constantly meeting were at the same like symposiums or the same journal clubs and stuff like that all the time. So I just kind of use my social media and I turn it into like a professional platform. And, I still tweet about how bad the Eagles suck every year and like all that kind of stuff. But I tweet my like professional opinions out into the void and just see what sticks. And it's gotten me great like networking opportunities. And I think if I would have stuck with the advice, like, don't be so controversial, like, don't post your opinions, like that kind of stuff, I don't think I would have had that experience. So I think just kind of realizing that this is the direction our society is rolling with and just using it as a strength and running with it has been one of the greatest resources in my young career so far. So
no, couldn't agree more. I talk with the students I work with a lot about that. And, the laptop I had in college had a 3.5-inch floppy disk drive in it, which most people be like, what are you talking about? What is that?
Right.
You had to have a .edu address to get on Facebook. And I just thought I refused. I thought it was so dumb, which is why I'm not a tech investor. But man, the access you have to information and good information, there's a lot of crap out there too, but
right.
Good information, people that you can just fast forward through so much stuff now that you couldn't, and so much of it's free. I feel like I'm 5 years behind where I could be. I just didn't have the same amount of access, nor would I have used it, in all honesty.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fun trip. It definitely has its pros and cons, but
I think what you said is a huge point of use it as a strength. It's all for putting professional opinion out there, as long as it's well thought out and you really think about it, and it's not just slinging the random things out there. I think that can make it such a good tool, and I agree completely. That's a great way to connect with people.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you can change or eliminate one thing, could be a modality, a common practice, mindset, or whatever you choose in the field of athletic training, what would it be?
I have been thinking about this since I saw that on the questions, and this is something that I'm very passionate about. Any one of my teammates will vouch for this. I am very anti-ice in outside of acute injury. I hate it. Coming from softball and working with baseball and softball in undergrad and being a pitcher, everybody gets a bag of ice. Everybody gets a bag of ice on something after everything. And I'm like, for what reason? Like, I don't understand. Go get a band, do an active recovery workout. Like, I don't understand. Go do some type of cool down movements or anything. I was like, I have resources for you guys, like that you can use after the games, after you pitch an entire bullpen session. I have stuff for you. Why aren't you getting a bag of ice? That's the last thing you want to do. Like, but I feel very passionately about this. I will get up on my soapbox every single day of practice. I have gotten to the point where I've convinced my coaches that I do not need ice. I am the exception to everyone. I do my band cool down and that is it, but everybody else is still on the ice train for now. But I was like, coming from a baseball, softball background, everybody uses too much ice when they could be doing something way more efficient for what they're trying to accomplish. And, I'll get there one day. I'll convince them one day, but right now I'm just slowly chipping away. If I can convince one person at a time that they should be doing a band workout after practice instead of, their ice cool down or whatever, instead of their 16 bags of ice and our poor athletic trainers are standing there with just a cooler, but I don't know. This is my biggest passion at softball practice. So, the girls think I'm crazy, but the athletic training students on the team understand. So
you've got no argument from me. I'm right there with you. Totally in support. So you're not alone. Last question is, what does being an athletic trainer mean to you?
All right. I would say being an athletic trainer is definitely being the first and arguably most important point of contact for someone. And I don't just mean that medically speaking, because I think that we're a great resource for, a variety of reasons. Maybe someone can't go to the doctor for whatever reason, or, their insurance isn't very helpful, I think medically we help out a lot with stuff on that end. But I think mentally we offer, like I said, I love psychology. And I just think we offer a very steady support system in a lot of people's lives. And like I said, watching my preceptors extend that support and empathy to me through everything that I went through, that's all I want in being an athletic trainer. And that's, I think that's why a lot of people get into athletic training, is because they want to help people. And I just think you become a nurturer in a sense, for someone, and a very steady and stable support system when maybe they don't have one, or, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's just, I don't know. That's why it's so important to me to kind of do what I do too, because that's just what athletic training means to me. It goes beyond the orthopedic sense of it, or the medical sense of it. It's so much more than that. So.
Well said. Anything else you would like to share before we wrap up and let people know where they can find you and follow you?
I think we covered it all, but I had a great time being on today. This is a lot of fun.
Oh, I'm glad it worked out. I'm looking forward to hearing your part 2 or continuation on the sports medicine broadcast. But if people did want to reach out to you, follow you, what's the best way for them to do that?
All right. Twitter is probably my most active. Excuse my Twitter handle. It hasn't changed since high school. It is Green, Meg, and Ham.
I really enjoy that, actually.
Yeah. I don't see it changing anytime soon. I love it. I think it just...
What an icebreaker.
Yeah, it's, it shows my personality a little bit. So, and then people can also find me on Instagram, and that's Meg X John 16. So those are probably my two most active, being Gen Z. So
Perfect. Well,
anything else
we'll
is
get those.
fine.
We'll get those linked up on the episode page when
All
we get
right.
this published. So, well, thank you for taking the time. I'm glad we got to make this work. And again, shortly after this one comes out, we'll have one with you, hearing you from the sports medicine broadcast. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.